Hi there, my name's Derek Pitman and this is Lawrence Shaw.
When we're not digging with Time Team, we're working closely with our Greek and Swedish partners on a fascinating research project in Thessaly, central Greece.
It's a little different from the typical Time Team project, but we think you'll enjoy it. We're part of an international team researching a city from antiquity that is now gradually being investigated through modern archaeological techniques. Much still remains unknown about the site, not least what its inhabitants would have called it. But archaeology has revealed some tantalising clues that bring us closer to the people that once lived here some 2,000 years ago. Barely concealed, just inches beneath the scrub, the story of ancient communities is mapped out under the plains of Thessaly.
Welcome to the Thessalian plain in Greece. Now, when most people think about ancient Greek archaeology, you might be forgiven if you think about Athens or Sparta, or maybe even Mount Olympus. But we're here in a little known site of Vlochos in central Greece. And over the next 2 weeks, we're going to be investigating this site that was first recorded in the early 19th century, but more recently, a collaboration between Greeks and Swedes have been looking to find out why it's so important. Our story begins in Vlochos in the region of Thessaly, some 300 kilometres northeast of Athens and around 80 kilometres from the coast. Today it's a rural farming landscape characterised by flat open plains punctuated by dramatic mountains. Aside from the odd tractor, Vlochos is a far cry from the hustle and bustle of the cities and the buzz of the coast. But, as one of our site directors, Robin Runland, explains, this wasn't always the case. Robin, Derek, when you invited me to your project in Greece, I was expecting sun, sea and summer. Why are we in central Greece in the middle of winter?
Well, there's more to Greece than fun in the sun, Lawrence. Yeah, we're actually at the moment standing in the middle of an ancient city. Yeah, ranging from the 4th century BC and onwards.
Wow.
Well, you can see the city wall running up the hill just behind us.
Just up behind you here,
yeah. But behind this van, just for several 100 meters, is this extended ancient settlement under the ground. Yeah.
As an ongoing research project, we have slightly longer than Time Team's traditional 3 days to get to the bottom of this story. In fact, the team's been working at the site now for over 5 years, using a combination of techniques to map out the plan of this ancient city. The project is a collaboration between local Greek authorities and the Swedish Institute at Athens, with participating researchers from Greece, Sweden, the UK and North America. For this latest visit, we have just 2 weeks to shed further light on its story. Site co-director Robin is an archaeologist at the Swedish Institute at Athens and the University of Thessaly.
Well, we started out in 2016 with an extensive program with geophysics and drone survey and mapping out everything that we could see basically on this site. So we have a pretty good idea what's going on here.
By interpreting scattered surface finds and exposed architectural remains, the team have identified a broad time span of habitation. Combining these with geophysical results which suggest overlapping structures, the site has 4 distinct phases of occupation spanning 1,000 years. But, as Derek highlights, in practice it's not easy to separate out these phases of activity.
It's an incredibly complex challenge to survey a site like this. We've got archaeology on different topographic levels, we've got standing features, we've got buried architecture, we've got a range of time periods all overlapping. So we've brought with us techniques to try and record and map this as non-invasively as possible.
One of the key techniques we've employed is magnetometry, which uses the Earth's magnetic field to help us see archaeological features buried beneath the topsoil. We've managed to map the entire flat field around the base of the hill, known as the Patama, which revealed an extensive street layout from the 4th and 3rd century BCE. We believe the city was at its largest during this period. That's the Hellenistic period, roughly the time of Alexander the Great up until the rise of the Roman Empire. The Hellenistic period was a golden age for Greek cultural influence across the world, and Vlochos at this point would have been a thriving hub.
One of the bigger ambitions of the project is to create a 3D reconstruction of the site, to give a sense of what it would have been like to live there in the Hellenistic or Roman periods. So we've been working with digital archaeologist Rich Potter from the University of Gothenburg in Sweden to help create a 3D model of the site throughout the season. The wonderful thing about the surveys we've done is you see so much detail. For example, right now, I can tell you we're walking down a classical Hellenistic street. It's about 8 metres wide. On my right here is a series of shop fronts and small buildings, and it shows up in the data so perfectly.
Amazing. And other than the data, are there any other signs that give us a hint as to what we're around? Because I'm seeing a few stones.
Yeah, so you should be able to see the front, the street front, so that's right here. Yeah,
so this
is the classical Hellenistic street. I'm in one of the buildings now, looking out at you on the road.
On the road, so there would have been carts coming down here, shop fronts in here, more presumably that way as well.
Yeah, houses, buildings, and then we suspect some fairly fancy sanctuaries and temples up on the slope.
That line's amazing, but there's a few more in here, aren't there? So we've got possibly a wall coming down here?
That's right, yeah. So one of the other things we've done is mapped all of these stones using GPS, so we can combine what we can see on the ground spatially with the geophysical surveys, and we've done some drone mapping of the whole site, so you can see all of the different buildings and structures that you can see from the air combined with the geophysical survey to give a really nice picture of the site.
And how do you know you called it a shop structure, but how do we know it's a shop?
So a lot of the information we get is from comparing it to other archaeological sites, other similar contemporaneous sites where they have been excavated. So whereas we can go extensive with our survey, other sites have excavated in detail, and that gives us some of the resolution.
I see. So basically its composition is comparable, and then the types of finds they've been finding within the shops gives them context for what it was used for.
Exactly, yeah, and a lot of these sites of this period are quite similarly constructed, so we can use one as an analogy for another.
And is there another one here?
I think so, yeah, so that's the back row of the shops, and then you've got the main city wall behind you, just there.
That raised bit?
Just over here, yeah, that raised bridge.
So much history beneath our feet. Sounds like the job's done. Why are we back? If you've got all this amazing data, I mean, we've done the whole area. Why have we come back?
But as with all archaeology, yes, we've answered some questions, but we've also asked some more. And one thing that really surprised us was there was an area of the data that showed up something very unexpected.
Right.
So we knew from the early work on the site that there was something here, and we suspected it was classical Hellenistic. But what we didn't know was the eastern end of the site was a massive monumental Roman wall.
Right.
Enclosing only a third of the site, so it truncates the site. It seems to cut across the classical Hellenistic street layout. So it's almost as if it's been implanted on top of the earlier archaeology.
And this wasn't known before, so the geophysics revealed this later.
Geophysics revealed it. It's visible in some early aerial photography from the 60s, but we didn't know what it was. So when we could see it in the geophysics, we could see towers, we could see gateways, and we could see that the archaeology inside that fortification was slightly different to what was going on outside.
Having been at least partially abandoned in the early 2nd century BCE, the city appears to have been reoccupied during the Roman Empire, nearly 500 years later. It's this later Roman phase that we're targeting over the next 2 weeks through an extensive resistivity survey. So we're looking for higher resolution data that can give us a nice map of that later enclosed phase of the settlement that up until a few years ago no one even knew was there. So we're hoping to tease that apart and better understand it.
Yeah, that's right, and most importantly, find out what's in there, because it's such a monumental structure. What's inside must be important. Back in the summer, I was here with some of the project team to put a trench over our earlier geophysical results, confirming what had been mapped and to get a better understanding of the different periods of occupation. So we excavated a 5 by 5 metre area, and this is what we uncovered just centimetres below the modern ground level. The last time somebody saw that wall, it might well have been 1,500 years ago, and it really doesn't get much better than this.
Right now, I see that those stones
So our trench from earlier in the year is just over here, and it's an amazing trench because we targeted two bits of the site. So a bit of classical Hellenistic, possibly destruction levels and some walls, but also an off-grid structure that seemed quite enigmatic, and we really wanted to try and understand it. So this is one of the reasons we want to do more resistivity, because we did 6 grids of resistivity here at really high resolution, and you could see the archaeology phasing wonderfully. And when you line up the trench and the geophysics, it is flawless.
So we're going to do a much larger scale targeted survey.
Yeah, we're going to head into the more complex bit of the site and try and tease apart some of the details. I can't wait.
If the results are anything like that we've seen here with the res, it's going to be
it's going to add so much to the story of the site.
We'd better get on with the survey then. For this season, we're undertaking a resistivity survey, where we insert probes into the ground that will pick up an electrical signal transmitted through the soil. The technique should identify buried stonework and foundations, perfect for this site.
10 centimeters.
Watch out.
You got that right. Me rescuing it.
And we're off! We're doing this survey at a much higher resolution than you often would, because when you have multiple overlaying structures, you need clearly defined data in order to see the relationships between them. While we can't see physical depth, we hope to differentiate structures that are on slightly different alignments. In this case, the later Roman period activity within the enclosure and the Hellenistic structures that lie beneath.
With survey underway, I take a break and head up the hill with Robin to find out more about the site and the project's research. Robin, what an amazing site this is. Just wondering, could you talk us through the history of the site, how it was first discovered and what we know about it?
Well, this place has probably always been known to the locals. We have these massive walls, these fortifications that are covering all the sides of this hill. But it was only about 200 years ago that it first came to attention as an ancient city.
Right.
And what we really have brought into this is this approach with more modern techniques.
I mean, you can see these beautiful walls going up behind us. What age do they date to?
Well, so this site, it has several phases of habitation. So we have walls and fortifications from the archaic period, that's 600 BC and onwards. And we have the classical Hellenistic period and the time of Alexander the Great. We have the Roman period. We have the early Byzantine period, when this region was heavily invaded from the north. So it's like a palimpsest of various periods. But basically, we're on a big hill in a plain landscape with a hilltop fortification and with walls running down on the sides of the hill.
Were you aware that there was going to be a settlement below the foot of this hill?
Yes, it had been assumed already, but really when you look at it from here, as you see, there's not much to see. It's mostly thistles. So it was kind of a surprise to us when we brought in the geophysics and we got these results.
Now, I'd argue that actually the geophysics isn't quite the best data that we've got, and whilst Derek might say that, there's something better out there, and it links to when we were last sat here, I think in the winter of 2018.
Well, we had managed to scramble up here in the dead of winter. It was cold, there was a lot of snow, and when we looked out on this field of thistles below us, we spotted how the snow started to melt in patterns. Which was incredible. We could see suddenly how the outlines of houses and fortification walls became apparent in the melting snow as patches where the snow had melted more than the patches the snow hadn't melted at all. It was incredible, something that we probably had never seen in Greece before. Happily, we managed to get a drone up. Half an hour later, it was gone. It was incredible to see.
It's quite exciting to think in 2 weeks, at the end of these 2 weeks, we're going to have a beautiful map. Well, provided Derek's geophysics works properly. But we're going to have this beautiful map that's going to complement all our data sets. And those snow marks are incredible. But in theory, don't tell Derek I said this, but we might have something even neater.
Hope so.
back to the survey, and we've got a lot of ground to cover over the next 2 weeks. 5 hectares, the equivalent size of several football pitches. One thing that we are keen to shed more light on is what appears to be a large courtyard house, perhaps the residence of an important local official. This is one of the largest features that was revealed previously in the snow marks.
Fotini Tuka is an archaeologist from the Hellenic Ministry of Culture and the local archaeological authority in Karditsa, and a key member of the project team here at Vlochos.
Fotini, γιατί είναι σημαντικός ο Vlochos?
Ο αρχαιολογικός χώρος του Βλοχού είναι ιδιαίτερα σημαντικός γιατί πρόκειται για μια αρχαία πόλη η οποία είναι εκτεταμένη, είναι οχυρωμένη και έχει μια στρατηγική θέση στην περιοχή. Η οχύρωσή της δείχνει ότι υπήρξε ένα στρατηγικό σημείο για πάρα πολλούς αιώνες και κατοικήθηκε επίσης διαχρονικά, δείχνοντας τον τρόπο διαχείρισης της περιοχής μέσα στο πέρασμα των αιώνων. Πρόκειται για μια από τις σημαντικότερες πόλεις της περιοχής βόρεια του Παλαμά, το όνομα της οποίας δεν το γνωρίζουμε. Ελπίζουμε στο πλαίσιο του προγράμματος ή οι επόμενοι μελετητές και ερευνητές να το βρούνε. Παρ' όλα αυτά είναι πολύ σημαντική γιατί μας δείχνει τον τρόπο της ζωής από τον 4ο αιώνα π.Χ. έως και τους πρώιμους βυζαντινούς χρόνους, τον τρόπο οχύρωσης και οργάνωσης μιας αρχαίας πόλης, η οποία έπαιξε πιθανώς σημαντικό ρόλο σε όλα τα ιστορικά χρόνια των περιόδων που διήρκησε.
Ναι, ωραία. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ, Φωτεινή.
Ευχαριστώ.
So, all of this evidence points towards a bustling urban centre with a lifespan of around 1,000 years across several distinct phases. And we know from the scale of its structures that it was a centre of some significance. Surely a city or polis of this size was acknowledged in the historic records. Yet archaeologists today still debate the identity of this enigmatic city, with several possible contenders suggested from fragmentary references and ancient accounts. Peresia, a site closely linked to Greek mythology, had long been deemed the most likely candidate. According to legend, Peresia was the home city of the Argonaut Asterion. However, a roof tile identified near the modern town of Eromitsi, some 6 miles away, has ruled this out. With Peresia firmly out the running, this leaves 2 other ancient Thessalian cities, Limnaeon and Phakion, that have not yet been located with certainty. Could our research project settle this question once and for all?
All right, mate.
Hello, mate. You all right?
Yeah, just finished the final day survey, ready for a beer.
Yeah, how's it going?
Yeah, it's nice to be a bit cooler today. How are the results looking? Have you had no?
Yeah, I've had a bit of a process. Have a look.
Okay.
Bit of a problem, I think.
What's going on there?
So you see how it's very highly contrasted. We've had to massively crop it because there's not much variation in the data. If we look at the aerial photography, you can see there should be a large, really substantial structure here.
Hang on a minute. So I can see the odd wall here, but this you were selling this as being way better than my amazing snow photograph.
To be honest, it should be. We should be seeing rooms, courtyards, hallways, a whole structure, but we're just not getting it in the data.
Why is that?
I think, to be honest, there might be far too much moisture in the soil. That means the signal is passing through the ground really rapidly and not being impeded by the archaeology.
To be fair, Stelios did say it's been raining for a month before we arrived. So groundwater's going to be quite high?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think looking back at our test res last autumn, it was much drier then. It was operating right on the edge of working. So the soil, I think, must hold the moisture quite well.
It is quite clayey.
With limited time remaining and the ground just too moist to get effective results, we've taken the tough decision to move the survey up the hill slope, where hopefully the ground will be drier. We're going to target an area that could be the site of a Hellenistic temple. Ancient Greek temples were traditionally dedicated to a particular god or goddess within the pantheon. While we don't know which gods were worshipped at this particular location, scattered finds from demolition layers previously discovered elsewhere on the site suggest that the goddess Enodia was worshipped at Vlochos. Enodia appears to have been particularly important here in Thessaly. Little is known about the cult of this elusive goddess, but Robin heads to the nearby museum at the ancient battlefield of Thermopylae to talk with archaeologist Lambros Stavroyannis to find out more. Based on his work at a similar temple site at Melatea, Lambros explains what the temple could have looked like and tells us a little bit more about this enigmatic goddess.
It's not a big building, it's a small building with a rectangular plan and an entrance at the narrow side of the building.
The excavation of this contemporary Hellenistic temple provides some interesting insight into contemporary religious practices.
We have an altar outside of the building where we found many ashes and bones of animals.
It has also helped to shed further light on the characteristics of Enodia. As Lambros highlights, Enodia was a multi-faced goddess with connections to children, unmarried daughters, married women, as well as other associations.
Death, home, family, the gates of the city, even the travelers.
In Thessaly, Enodia is often depicted in votive steles and figurines carrying torches and accompanied by horses and dogs. Believed to be her sacred animals, horses and dogs have a chthonic character, meaning they are connected to the underworld and death. Enodia's cult has been identified across the classical world, from Santorini to Sicily, although her influence particularly resonated in Thessaly.
So she's so important in Thessaly that there she takes place as one of the 12 gods of Mount Olympus in the Hellenistic period.
Yes, Enodia replaced the cult of Artemis and became one of the 12 goddesses of Olympus. But this god is a pre-Olympic god in Thessaly.
So she was here before the 12 gods.
Exactly.
So, end of the first week.
Yeah, the first week so far has been beset by technical issues. We've had various issues with equipment, which is one of the things that happens when you travel. Equipment, you bring things with you, so you don't always have the right spare parts, the bits and pieces you need. So we've had a few technical issues to overcome. And as we've seen, we're struggling with the moisture levels on the site. So the actual data is not quite as strong as we'd hoped. So while we're walking over what we are fairly sure is a substantial Roman structure, we haven't yet added any new information to that story.
It's a real shame, but after this week, we're going to send Rich up to another site further up the hill.
Yeah, we're going to go up the hill and see if we can investigate what could be a temple site.
I've got one more request. I might like to target one more thing with a resistive theme.
Okay.
It's pretty big.
Yeah.
We know about it, but I think it will show us some more information. I'm not going to tell you what it is.
All right then.
Well, I'm intrigued to discover more about Lawrence's mystery target, but we're halfway through the current field season and I can't help but feel slightly frustrated at this point. While it was the weather that helped reveal the plan of the Roman city in the melting snow, this time it's the weather, the earlier heavy rain, that's prevented us from mapping it out in further resolution.
But that's just the way it goes sometimes in archaeology. We have to adapt the strategy, switch the focus, and explore other avenues. We're still investigating the suspected temple, and, thanks to Lambros, we're starting to understand the beliefs of the people who once lived here. And of course, there are other parts of the site which I reckon might yet yield results. There's thousands of years of history buried at Vlochos. You can't expect their secrets to be revealed that easily. That said, I've just got a good feeling about next week. Coming up in part 2.
Lawrence, what are you doing over here?
How you doing?
Commodus was an emperor from around 180 to 192.
Is that the same character as in the movie Gladiator?
Yes.
Well, I told you I had a surprise or a secret area I wanted to target, didn't I?
Absolutely staggering. And
we walked around this area, we couldn't see anything.
Many times we've been here.
hats off to Ian. He spotted the stonework and he knew instantly it was something good. Wow.
Normally you'd watch Time Team and you think nothing really happens on the last day.
Congratulations! Great news, great news.
Wow. Absolutely incredible, and it could be game changing.
Join Time Team on Patreon to access exclusive 3D models, masterclasses, and behind-the-scenes insights.